Okay, well, we've got an old one here. So this is a Barclay Ambulance. At one point, these used to be very highly desirable, very collectible. I'm seeing them going for almost nothing now. For instance, I got this for $3. In the past, I've seen them for go, in the close to 100. In perfect condition, of course. This is not perfect condition. By the way, if you haven't noticed, I always go for the worst example of the best models. And that's what I always go for. And I've been really finding some cool stuff lately. Anyway, it's hard to tell how old these are. You go to all sorts of sources, and everybody has something different to say. You go by the tires, and they started using these tires around the 30s, from what I can tell. And these axles, man, it depends on who you talk to. It could be either around 1936 that they started using these, or even earlier. I don't know. So at the very oldest, this would be 94 years old. I'll probably use that in the thumbnail because you have to have a little bit of clickbait on YouTube. But more realistically, it's probably closer to the 85 to 90 years old. Still, really old. And it's a cool toy. And this is not die cast. This is slush cast. It's got lead in it. You can see where it's damaged here. We're missing a wheel. And really, the wheels are the hardest part. I can buy these, but a set of 4 costs about $10. And like when you have a bucket of these, and I got a bunch of these, I just don't want to spend that much. So I'm really working on manufacturing some wheels. We're going to get into it. I've tried all sorts of stuff that did not work, and I found something that I think will work. But anyway, we're going to fix this up and try to make it as close to looking as new as the day it came off the line as possible. It's going to be a lot of fun. So to make the wheels, I'm going to use a mold made out of silicone. You can find the silicone at any hobby shop. It's really popular with jewelry makers right now. So I looked through my bucket of Barclay cars, and I found the one that had the best wheel I could find. This is the most round, the best shape. It still had a lot of cracks, and what I did this off camera because it was kind of finicky, but I coated it in super glue to cover up all those cracks to the best of my ability, because this mold is going to show up every little tiny little defect. All right. And then I'm going to pour the silicone on top of it, and this will create a mold that I'll be able to fill. I hope I have enough. Come on. All right, that's enough. Good. And this mold should be ready in about 4 or 5 hours. So my original idea was to 3D print a wheel, and you can see this is I modeled this up in Tinkercad. It's pretty close. And my idea was that I could use this and make a mold. And it would be just, perfect. I wouldn't have any of those cracks or anything from the old tires. But I didn't realize is that there's something about the 3D resin that makes silicone not cure. So I would end up having a puddle of silicone uncured all around this, and it never made a mold. I even tried covering this in lacquer and clear coats and a couple different things, and for some reason, it never made a good mold. So didn't realize that would happen. Another way I could make these wheels is I could get flexible 3D resin. They have some that's supposed to be the same flexibility as rubber, but it's very expensive. It's like $40. I'll probably end up going that route, particularly since the way that I'm planning here is not perfect. It's good, but it's not perfect. So I'm taking these wheels off. I'm cutting these axles out because these axles are no good. They're all rusted. Never gonna look good. These wheels are pretty trash too. No point keeping them. They're hard as a rock. And they've all cracked. I know some people like the cracked wheels and like that look. I don't. I think it's terrible. All right, so we got a little bit of damage in the back, especially down here. The issue with this is that bending this back, oh man, just doing that right there. I bend it back, that's really loose. So maybe I can glue that little piece in there. Back here, this is so brittle. When it gets this old, it's amazing that this is even still, holding together and hasn't just fallen apart. So I'm not even going to try to fix that. You won't be able to really tell from the outside. I mean, this is slush cast. They're not like super high definition. So yeah, I think the first thing we need to do is get the paint off, and then we'll look and see how the body looks. I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of problems. There always is with these slush cast. You notice how thick the paint is. It's very thick paint. And they did that to cover up all these little defects. So when you're painting these yourself, don't be afraid to use thick paint. They did back then. There was a reason, and that's part of the look. It's a thick paint. I kind of like it. It does cover up some of the details, but you notice there's not a lot of fine details, and that's because it's going to be covered up with paint. That's good. That's yeah, if you don't mind. I don't know. That might have been a bad idea. So I tried all sorts of things to fill these molds, and nothing, either it didn't have the right flexibility, or didn't have the right color, or it didn't set up. Lots of problems. But what I did find what worked best is you can go to a craft store and you can get these white glue gun sticks. And sometimes people use them for glue. Sometimes people use them actually for this reason. It's for making casts out of in silicone molds. And it's the closest thing I've found to the flexibility and the color of the original Barclay wheels. It's not perfect. I'm still looking for something perfect, but this does seem to be the best thing I've found so far. The nice thing about this is it only takes like 30 seconds for it to set up. So if it doesn't work, you can just try right again. Sometimes it doesn't work, but that looks pretty good. Yeah, that's really good. So I'll cut around this edge, and when you compare it to one of these, it's not too bad. Yeah, I think that'll work. So I've cleaned most of the paint off of this. I'm still seeing, I didn't see this with my naked eye, but under the camera I can see a little bit there. I need to get off. As you can see, this is pretty beat up. This is super soft metal. There's a lot of lead in this. I'm going to clean up like those edges right there with a little bit of sandpaper to try and get that out. But those are so deep, I'm going to end up changing the contours of it. So I don't want to do that. And the paint is going to cover up a lot of this. That casting line, some people would just sand that out, but I'm going to leave it because that's how it originally was. I like the casting lines. Here's a little tip: when you're strip these things, a lot of times the stripper will get stuck in here. It's really hard to get out. So if you take a paper towel and run it through, look at all this junk. See that? It's not very easy. I kind of push it and wiggle it through, but look at all that is cleaning out. Yeah, ugh. Oh man, look at that. That's all that was missed in the washing. So I'll do this, a dozen times till the paper towel comes out completely clean. Ugh, gross. So you may be wondering what's the difference between a slush cast and a die cast, or slush mold, as I think is the proper word for it. What's the difference between that and a die cast? And the slush molds were used a really soft metal, and it would be poured into the mold, kind of like how we would do a resin mold, similar to how I did the wheels. And then they would shake the mold so that it coated the outside of it. And what you got was not very good detail, and the inside's very rough. So a die cast, they actually use a high pressure and squirt the metal into a mold, and then it's ejected out. So this gives it a much more detail, and it can use harder metal. At least that's my understanding. If I'm wrong in the comments, I'm sure someone will correct me, and that's perfectly fine. I ended up with 4 good wheels. I actually made about a dozen or more actually before I got 4 that I was really pleased with. You get little pockets of bubbles and stuff. That's just the way it works. And so they're okay. They are very white, a little too white, and they've got a little sheen to them. I don't know if you can see it on camera, but it's not quite glossy, but it's not the dull that the rubber is. So I'm going to try to put a dull coat on them and see if that makes them any better. I wish they were a little bit less white, a little bit more off-white. Maybe someday. Let's see if I can focus. It's not wanting to focus. Hoping for a little bit more off-white. This is a little bit too white, honestly. I may play around with the color of my plastic. I can dye it. It's a process, but it is possible. And then I can remelt it and pour it in. But it is rubbery. I'll show you. Here, I got a little piece. So here, this is the same stuff. You can see it's really, really flexible. Really good. It's not sticky at all. It's not tacky or anything like that. It's just a flexible. It is plastic. It's not rubber, but it's as close as I'm going to be able to get with my current budget. Alright, so the paint's done. I did put a clear coat on it, and the original probably didn't have it, but this type of paint needed that for protection. And honestly, it keeps the kind of the same sheen as what the original paint that I've seen had it, that old lead-based paint. So let's look at the tires here. So these tires are not the perfect color. I think they look good. I think they're the right shape. The mold did really well. A little bit too white maybe. I don't know. Against this white paint they look pretty good. So it's not as bad as I thought. So originally how they put the wheels on is they would crimp this right here. So you'd have it crimped. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to bring it down to my vise. I'm going to squeeze it with my vise and crimp those. Alright, so I've crimped those ends, and that's just how they would have been like from the factory. Looks pretty good. Rolls, these were never like push-and rollers. They're not like Hot Wheels. They were just to be pushed along and for the wheels to roll, which is what's happening. So that is going to finish up this restoration. It was very tempting to chrome up the grill and all that stuff, but I'm trying to make it look just like it did when it came out of its package. And while it doesn't look exactly like it, it looks really good. Pretty close. The wheels particularly, I'm pleased with the process I found for that. I'm still going to be working on that. You might see me in the future using a different process as I experiment and continue to do that. Anyway, I like it. If you remember, this was the before, and now we have the after. And thank you so much for going along with me as I did this simple little restoration of this very old toy. And I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.